We talked about how we're going to kind of set the landscape for the New York State criminal check landscape. And I'm going to bring Tom back in here so I can stop talking for a minute. And Tom, I know you've been with us for a little bit. You've obviously done New York State you've dealt with New York State background checks before. Would you mind kind of setting the stage and explaining the structure of New York State's court system so everybody gets an understanding of what we're dealing with here?
Absolutely, Alex. I will do my best, but Alex and Michelle, please keep me honest. Yeah, we fought. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate the opportunity to connect. We thought it would be beneficial to start the conversation today with a broad overview of the New York court system. We're going to be getting into detail into these components here as we continue the presentation, but just to set the table so we're all on the same page, just wanted to go over broadly what each of these components look like. So when we look at New York State and the court system, you see the image here with the New York State OCA at the top, local, town, and village courts at the bottom. Let's look at it like a pyramid. 62 counties across New York State. All of those counties are required to report their information straight up to the top, the pyramid, to the New York State OCA. For those of you doing background screening in New York, you're very aware of the varying fee structure in the state. So if your background check program is predominantly county-based, you've seen counties cost anywhere from, well, a zero charge all the way up to $95 an inquiry. And those of you who have decided to run the New York State OCA as your background check, well, you've seen those invoices too, and that can be a pretty expensive background check as well. So congratulations, New York. You still are, I believe you still are the most expensive state to do background screening in. And we'll be talking about that today. It's what makes you pretty unique here. What also makes you pretty unique is that your court system is, for the most part, fragmented. You don't have a court system that is online and consolidated. And I wanted to draw a contrast before we continue. 17 years here in the industry, 5 years with CIChecked, but a lot of time spent with background screeners talking about New York background screening from an outsider's perspective. So just wanted to draw a quick comparison before we continue. And I thought I would pick on where I'm from, which is Wisconsin, the Badger State. So in Wisconsin, and there are many other states like Wisconsin, we have an online centralized court system. It makes background screening here fast, easy. There's no cost to accessing the CCAP court system. All the counties, with the exception of one, feed into the court system, and you get your primary, your misdemeanor, your felony, your pending cases, really anything you need to make an informed hiring decision. It's all in one spot. So congrats, Wisconsin. You have a great court system. And our neighbor to the west, Minnesota, their court system is very similar. And there are many pockets across the country where you're going to find consolidated online court systems. Now, to contrast, New York, you have a fragmented court system. You're not online like the example I gave in Wisconsin. So you have a unique challenge in this state. You have the option of county court research or state research. And there are challenges between both levels. And we're going to be addressing that here today. If we hop over to the next slide, we'll be discussing the challenges between both county, state levels, and then later in our presentation, a third option that does help shore up some of these gaps that you see. But just quickly, you'll see here on our chart between the county and state level, in terms of what you're going to find, conviction information, of course, you'll find at both county and statewide level, pending information, which is pretty critical for some employers in their background checks at the state level, felony information at both. But where we're really going to drill in today is misdemeanor conviction history, which is predominantly found at the lower court level. So again, referencing the pyramid, you have your statewide, you have your primary court seat, and all the lower level courts that you have to hit to get many of these misdemeanor convictions. So we'll be touching on that too. And then as we go on here, you'll see where data is updated, when results are available, and so on. Ultimately, I've seen the puzzle of New York criminal background screening approached a number of different ways. And I truly believe it is because of many of the challenges you see with these two options here, and many background screening providers not having a third option that can help shore up a lot of the gaps. Looking forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Well, you said you're from Wisconsin. Have you noticed any major changes when selling or talking to New York State employers versus what you used to do?
Oh, absolutely. It transition to CIChecked has been a wonderful learning curve in terms of really digging into the new, like how nuanced the state is with how background checks occur. And I'll save a few of these comments for later, but in my experience, we would always look at New York and just say, hey, it is what it is. You have your county option, you have the OCA option, and of course, your clients see the invoices really start to add up with that statewide. And we'll talk later today about the risks with defaulting to county courts. So it is, if not the most challenging state to do background checks in. But we'll talk about that. There's some things we can do to help. Thanks, Alex.
Well, thanks for your light, encouraging outside words, Tom. That's great. Yeah, appreciate it. So we're going to move into the Office of Court Administration search, the OCA search. So Tom said everything kind of flows up to the OCA. Michelle, we saw our poll that kind of referenced comprehensiveness, thoroughness, turnaround time as being important to people, and we're surprising that cost really wasn't that important, which is a good thing, I guess. So would you mind explaining a little bit about what the OCA is, what it covers, what people can expect to get when they do a search through that database?
Sure, Alex. So Tom referenced this a little bit. So NYS OCA, New York State Office of Court Administration. Almost every state has some equivalent organization. Sometimes it's the AOC, Administrator Office of Court, or something along those lines. But almost every state has one. But they're all different in how they operate. And in New York State, the Office of Court Administration, they pulled together data back in around 2002. They previously only pulled together about 16 counties worth of data, but I believe it was around 2002, 2004 when they released their statewide system that has evolved into what it is today. But as Tom mentioned, our court system's fragmented, which also means the reporting system up into an Office of Court Administration situation is fragmented as well. But the Office of Court Administration really was all that was out there for a while. Other things were in development and happening, but didn't come to market the way that the Office of Court Administration brought theirs to market. And also, when it first came out, it was $52. Then it went up to $65, and then most recently, which has been a few years now, it went up to $95. So the legislature decides to increase that price on occasion. So it's been a while, so I wouldn't be surprised if something is in the works there as well. So there's a couple of things with the OCA and the reporting. There's also some limitations when it comes to the OCA. And some of that has to do with the fee structure. So you know, imagine that today you had an unlimited budget for background checks. Well, the fee structure doesn't really it really doesn't come into play. But at $95 per name run through the Office of Court Administration, that adds up in a hurry. And we say per name. When you're running a search in the New York State Office of Court Administration, you have to enter the exact first name, the exact last name, and the exact date of birth to get the exact results that match exactly to that search. So if somebody's used multiple names in whatever time frame you want your background check to be, if it's a 7-year look back, a 10-year look back, each name needs to be run separately and run through there. Now, that can get a little expensive if you also want to run name variations. Mike, Michael, Jen, Jennifer, some of the examples that Alex has up here on the slides. So there's a lack of what we call in the industry fuzzy logic in the searching, which happens with the New York Office of Court Administration. So it's an exact science, so to say. Weekly updates from the court databases. So we use weekly, being a little loosely. Nobody's been able to really tell us for sure what the reporting requirements are and how that's monitored and tracked as well. There are alternatives out there that are actually same day, actually a couple hour results, versus right now, I think the Office of Court Administration is running 24 to 48 hours and getting you clear results and maybe 72 for hits. So there is a bit of a delay there. Also, the Office of Court Administration a few years ago decided to arbitrarily implement a misdemeanor redemption policy. This is interesting because it is kind of counter to today's clean slate law, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I think the Office of Court Administration has to go through some changes there in order to effectively administer the clean slate law that they've been put in charge with. So there's lots of changes coming there. And that also leads to the OCA does not provide vehicular misdemeanors unless they're DUI, DWI related. I think that that's got to change as well. So like, I believe it's like leaving the scene of an accident or causing bodily injury due to an accident are vehicular misdemeanors that wouldn't be reported. As a person who also hires, I'm concerned about that kind of a judgment in integrity when you leave the scene of an accident, especially when you've injured somebody, or one or the other. So a lot of things to consider there when it comes to the Office of Court Administration.
Right. Thanks, Michelle. I would like to point out here, right on this slide, we do have a little link there. CIChecked uncovers sex offender of the NYS OCA myth. Everybody's going to get these slides, so you'll have access. It's a case study we wrote. It kind of speaks to what Michelle just spoke about there. There was a data mix-up in the OCA. They changed the birth date from a 14 when it could have been a 4, and something slipped by them. So little things like this. So it does really come into play in real-life scenarios when you're hiring, and we just wanted to give you a kind of a proof of a real-life scenario that could happen. So, Michelle, we saw that cost really, at least for the people here today, it wasn't the most important thing in the background checks. It was more comprehensiveness, data, turnaround time. Besides the fee, the $95 OCA fee, what's the real cost to employers when they solely use the OCA cert?
Well, you run the risk of missing some information, the comprehensiveness and the compliance details there. The Office of Court Administration is not under the guise like a CRA would be, like a company like ours would be, a reporting agency would be, and stuff. So you've got some issues there. Also, the cost to employers, time to hire. We talked about the timeliness of the OCA and its search there when there's alternatives, and a large client using an alternative saw a decrease in time to hire by 44% by incorporating a couple of different things that we worked with them on and stuff. So, that is important because you can lose candidates and things like that. So that was part of the comprehensiveness and the timeliness that was part of your poll.
Perfect. Thanks, Michelle. So speaking of polls, it was a great segue. Thanks. I know it wasn't planned. We do have another one right here. We want to ask which drawback of the NYS OCA that you learned about just now concerns you the most. So I'll go ahead and launch this. Feel free. You don't have to vote, but we'd really love it if you did. We can get an understanding of what people are most concerned about when you're talking about the OCA specifically. And we'll leave it up for, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. We usually got answers pretty quick last time. Yeah, interesting. Give it another 10 seconds for anybody to put their vote in. Nice. So a little bit less activity on that one, but we are most concerned about limited name matching. So the fuzzy logic seems to be the most important thing here. Again, high cost for search. On this particular one, like Tom, I think you mentioned New York is the most expensive in the country. Ever so eloquently throw that out there. So that's important to us too. Misdemeanor redemption. I guess that's not too important right now, but we'll go into a little bit more a little bit later and explain it a little bit more deeply here. So I'll stop sharing here. And we're going to move on to specifically New York State county criminal searches. So I'm going to bring our resident county expert, Tom, back in here to talk a little bit more about it. Tom, can you discuss how that fragmentation you talked about earlier with the 60 different counties, local town, village courts, all that stuff? can you discuss how it kind of creates some data challenges for New York employers when they are trying to hire?
Certainly. Thank you, Alex. Thank you. So, yeah, as Alex mentioned, 62 counties across the state of New York. And to do a quick callback to one of the previous slides, again, let's think about that pyramid again, where you have that larger primary court seat in the middle and lower level courts underneath that. The larger primary county court seat is where you're going to have your felony cases. The lower level courts, as we note here, misdemeanor cases are where those will generally be stored. And so those will be stored at the local, town, or village courts. So as you mentioned, the court system is fragmented. You may be opening yourself up to risk depending. If you are doing a predominantly county court background check, you may be opening yourself up to risk if you're only approaching that larger primary county court seat. We'll hop on to the next slide here. The question is, why does that matter? I think that's the question. And taking a quick step back. In my time in the industry, I have seen generally the standard approach to background screening being county court based. Talk to your background check vendor. 7-year county court search, all counties. That tends to be pretty standard across the industry, perhaps for good reason. In Wisconsin, that totally works. We have that online centralized court system. Minnesota, it totally works. Many other states, that approach works. I feel as though background screeners, from what I've seen, they take that approach and they shoehorn it into New York, where, again, depending on how you're approaching county courts, you may be missing some pretty critical misdemeanor convictions. So I say all of that to, again, draw a contrast. And if you're working with the vendor, your background check is county court based, we're giving you some items here that you can take back to who you're working with and challenge them. For instance, hey, vendor, Albany City Court, forcible touching. Does our background check program protect us from those types of convictions in Albany City Court? And you can work down this list and see various other misdemeanor convictions you can only find at lower level courts. So why does it matter? Well, we work quite often with regulated entities, healthcare, for example, financial services. There are hits on this list that are absolutely critical to be reviewed for those organizations. And if they're only approaching that larger court seat, their program's open to risk. Perhaps you're an employer who wants to make just a well-informed hiring decision. You want a complete picture of the individual you're onboarding, who's coming into your company, interfacing with your environment, your other employees. Well, I don't blame you. You want to see this information too. So before we move on, I'll just tell a quick story. We work with an organization who came to us. Their long-standing vendor was running county court research. It came to their attention that some pretty critical misdemeanors were missed on a background check. They were with this provider, I think, for 10 years. Never ran an audit of their program. And now we have a red flag, a missed misdemeanor, and something that absolutely had to be caught before that individual made it past the background check, through onboarding, and on to day one as a new hire. The organization challenged us, CIChecked, can you find it? Well, yeah, we're New York background screening experts. We found the misdemeanor conviction. We helped clean up their program, and they're certainly happier today, but they still had an individual make it through all of their checks and balances to day one of employment with the background check that didn't show them what they needed to see. Now, I share all of this not to put like the shock factor or the scare factor out there, but simply to say, if you're running a county court background check, go back to your vendor and ask. You can use the Albany City Court example. Forcible touching, Albany City Court. Are you protecting us in that instance? And you have many other examples here. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tom. I just want to throw out that, we've all had some time to read through this list. I'm sure everybody has. These aren't, parking tickets or speeding tickets. These are serious convictions that would give you legal right to not hire a person based if the conviction directly applied to their job. So it is a big deal. Like Tom said, it really does happen. And I'm actually going to bring Michelle back in here, talk a little bit about how New York State classifies some crimes as misdemeanors that maybe other states that your company, if they're multi-state that you work in, that you hire in, wherever else, that other states consider felonies. So, Michelle, if you wouldn't mind taking us through this. Oh, hold on, you're muted again.
I'm so excited to share my knowledge. I keep forgetting to unmute myself. Imagine a world where every state classified every crime the same. Well, that's not the world we live in, you know? So every state has their own penal code and every state classifies things slightly differently. Case in point here, especially any of you out of state employers that are looking at your state penal code and saying these are okay if they have a conviction and they work for our organization, these are not, and making your independent assessments as the EEOC recommends, or those of you in New York State as Article 23A guides you through, things like that. But you want to apply as consistent of a background screening program as you can, but you're crossing state lines. So you've got issues to consider there. So you've got certain situations that Alex has up on the slide here. Issuing a bad check in Georgia and Michigan are felonies. In New York, it's a misdemeanor. Petty larceny over $1,000. So this is like, nursing home situation, stealing from a resident or something like that. In New Jersey and Virginia, Illinois, New Mexico, that's going to be a felony. In New York, it's a misdemeanor. So, how closely are you comparing your actual criminal convictions across state lines becomes an issue. But a thing to point out here, and the main reason this is on here, kind of went sideways on you a little bit, is really that, a lot of crimes in New York are misdemeanors. So if you're not doing a statewide or alternative state type of search that searches the lower courts, if you're solely doing a county criminal search, you are not going to get any of this. That's the big point to take home here.
So, and I've personally gotten a lot of questions of, and some of you might understand how this works, but for those of you that don't, can you, Michelle, kind of explain to us how county criminal search actually works? How do you physically do it? Because I've got a lot of questions of, you have my social security number. Why can't you find everything in one database, right? Why isn't it all there? So would you mind going through just step by step for those who might not know?
Sure. Our industry would be very different if every search was being able to be run on social security number. But of course, then again, would the privacy legislation be out of control as well? So most criminal records are held by name, and then date of birth is pretty popular in there as well. Sometimes you can get address associated with it as well. So when you're going to the county court, whether a runner is going or there's an electronic access to the court records or something like that, you're going in and you're putting in the information. Some courts actually require money orders, and so they require you to mail something because it's the only way you can get a money order there unless you're actually going to pay a courier to go there, which in some cases some organizations do and when they're close and stuff like that. So county criminal record searches can be very laborious, especially in New York. Other states do have it much more automated and much more electronic, and there's not nearly as many money orders required. We send out hundreds of dollars of money orders every week just to get county level information to support other searches that we have going on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michelle. So Tom touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to ask you a question here. What do you think, or what questions should HR professionals be asking their current providers about this county or state level coverage? I know Tom touched on it, but from the expert, what do you think?
Sure. So, Tom was great there and right on, but what exactly are you searching in New York? Ask a really open-ended question and see what they come back with. Don't let them be too vague, but keep it pretty open-ending and let them come back with something there. And then it's kind of a twofold answer here. I wouldn't just leave it at that. Can you show me what misdemeanors you found in New York in the last month? There will be very few, if any, and I think we touch on this, that the county courts will occasionally have a disposition for a misdemeanor because it started as a felony. That's the only reason why they would. And I'm sorry, I think I just covered somebody else's slide piece, but
No.
essentially, kind of keep it twofold there and really nail them down. Well, what is your source? What's your resource? What are you getting in New York? You can ask about other states, but I think you're picking up on the idiosyncrasies of New York, or we like to call it the nuances of New York.
No, yeah, you hit it exactly on the nail on the head there, Michelle. She does have a point. If occasionally you will get a misdemeanor in a county court, but those almost always started as a felony and were pled down. So it's the exception rather than the rule there. We've had a couple people say, ha, I got one, haha, but no, we know it's the exception, not the rule there. So we're going to move on past county courts now. We'll go into, we told you we were going to offer an alternative for New York State criminal screening. So, Michelle, I'm going to bring you right back in. Sorry about that. You got to unmute again. Now that we've discussed kind of the other ways to obtain criminal history in New York State, can you tell us what CI has done to kind of answer the cost issue on the OCA and the data issue for the county criminal searches within New York State?
Sure. Thanks for the reminder to unmute myself there. How many times can I do that in one webinar? Not that there's a lot of background noise here, but okay. New York State OCA. So back, this is going back a long time. Before the New York State OCA actually had their statewide, I was introduced to law enforcement, a couple individuals from law enforcement back in 1999, and they had some data they were pulling together and felt it was very useful. And also, they were really interested in protecting the youth population and vulnerable populations with the data that they had. So we formed a partnership. Like I said, it was 1999. We actually didn't sell or make any money on our what we put together till 2011. That's not 2001. It's not a couple years. It's 2011. It was a 12-year journey that we went on, pulling all the data together from New York, culling it, making sure to eliminate gaps and everything like that. We had some clients, great clients that beta tested us for us in 2010. Thank you for those of you who are on and who did that for us. So, there was a bit of a labor of love, but today, 14 years later, it's really a proven solution in New York, and it's really become the gold standard in New York. People lean towards it for a number of reasons. And some of the things that are going to resonate with this audience is the fuzzy logic availability. So the accuracy of the search without going crazy and running a $95 search on Mike, Michael, and Smith and Smythe and any other name variation that can come back, having some form of fuzzy logic. You still need to run the aliases and things like that, but there's a lot that can happen when you're combining 62 county court systems and every lower court there that's supposed to be reporting into the OCA, and you're looking for that type of accuracy. A lot can happen when you don't have fuzzy logic on that. So when you have something like NYChecked that applies the fuzzy logic as a first step in a tiered system, you're bringing a lot of things forward for a very modest cost when you consider everything involved with that. So we've worked diligently with law enforcement. We did focus mainly on protecting youth and vulnerable populations in the beginning, but since then, this is available to all of our clients and other background screening companies as well. We do wholesale this data, and that's NYChecked.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. I'll let you mute again if you like. So, Tom, I'm going to bring you back in because you're in the trenches every day talking to New York State employers about, the differences here. So we saw earlier we had a little bit of a grayed out chart, which I selfishly created in Photoshop. But now without the grayed out, Tom, would you explain a little bit about, a little of a comparison of NYChecked to county and the state search in New York?
Sure. Thanks, Alex. And this is my favorite slide in the deck. As I mentioned earlier, in my experience, like in the industry, always looking at New York as sort of like an is what it is kind of state. Your hands are a bit tied without a third option. So, you're going to roll the dice if you're relying predominantly on county court research, and we reviewed that, the potential, the very real possibility of missing some critical misdemeanor convictions. So you roll the dice there, but ultimately you're going to pay the price if you run your searches through the New York State OCA and you see how those invoices really add up with the $95 per inquiry fee. And we talked about some of the other factors in that state search that to be aware of too. So what I really enjoy now is having truly a third option where New York isn't just what it is. You do have New York checked that you can have in your background screening toolbox if it's a good fit for you. So making a comparison now across all three options, I hope you can see with many of these different areas that New York check does help balance that scale between making sure costs are in line while getting the information you need for your program. So you're looking where we shore up some of that some of those gaps between conviction history, pending information history, misdemeanor conviction history. But then as you move down the graph, you're seeing where that the improvement over fuzzy logic really comes into play to make just a drastic improvement of an overall New York background check. But what I really enjoy talking about here with folks, aside from cost, ultimately is when results are available. So if we can reduce your time to hire, improve your onboarding experience, and make that just fast and easy, that's a huge win for us and for the folks that work with us. Thanks, Alex.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Thanks, Tom. So we do have one more poll here to talk about NYCheck. And we just want to know out of these, and I think I might know the answer if we're consistent in our answers here, but which NYCheck feature would deliver the most value for your screening process? So I'll leave it up again for 30 seconds, 45 seconds. If you'd like to answer, you want to look on, we're going to keep it anonymous. We're not going to hound you if you answer. We just want to know for our marketing, what should we focus on? Interesting. So yeah, kind of in line with what we had before. So it seems like enhanced results are again the most important. I thought name matching would be up a little bit higher based on our last one, but enhanced results, same type of answer there. Cost savings and turnaround time, not super important, but again, we want to make sure that data is accurate and from the person that we say that it's from. So I'll stop sharing here. And lastly, I did mention we're going to talk a little bit about New York State compliance and best practices. So Tom, I won't torture you with this. We'll make Michelle talk about this one, being the expert. I don't blame you. I don't know enough about it either here. But we're going to go kind of three main New York State compliance initiatives that we feel are important, that we feel New York employers should be aware of, that if one of them is more to date, that you need to be preparing for sooner rather than later. So Michelle, would you mind taking us through the couple that we've prepared today?
Sure, thanks, Alex. So I'm going to start with the New York Clean Slate, the most recent one. And if you really, really want an in-depth situation, we did a presentation with an attorney that represented the background screening industry, Todd Higgy, and an attorney that represented New York State employers, Joan Marie Dowling, and a representative from the PBSA, Rory, the Professional Background Screeners Association, and myself as the moderator. We did that in November, so there's some great content. You can reach out to Alex and he can connect you to that. But I want to give you just a little bit on the Clean Slate Act. So the New York State Office of Court Administration, as I said earlier, they've been tasked with enforcing this. Now they have 3 years to do that. It became effective November 16th, I believe it was. So we're into the first year. Now, essentially, they are working that certain misdemeanors after 3 years, the slate is cleaned. They are expunged, evaporated, taken away from view for most situations from a publicly accessible database. They're still there for other situations, but not the situation we're talking about. And then 8 years for felonies. Now, this is only some misdemeanors and it's only some felonies. And it only applies if other things happen. So there's a lot that the OCA has to do here and a lot of things they're doing behind the scenes and connecting with law enforcement and different things, some of the stuff we already did for our data set, NYCheck. But they're putting a lot together in order to put this program in place. but they're the only ones who can really decide what's in the criminal record or not. So that's why after we get some information based on NYChecked and some fuzzy logic, then we know where to go and how to hone in on running the right search for that $95 with New York State OCA. So they'll continue to do their cleanup, but it's going to be a lot less than a lot of people think once they get down to it and stuff. So there's not a lot you as employers can do to interpret that. You have to take what the results are and you have to work off of it. Now, remember, they have 3 years to enforce this, so some stuff might already be wiped out and some stuff might not. Nobody knows the secret sauce behind how exactly OCA is rolling this out yet. And they're early on in the process. So that's the New York Clean Slate Act. Intriguing, very interesting. For those of you clients online, Alex and I are talking about having a very client-specific, basically kind of a fireside chat on that. So if you want some more information or are looking for something, reach out with what you're really looking for and also watch our emails as we put out that client exclusive opportunity there to really get into the Clean Slate Act. But then we also have Ban the Box, and this is in a number of places. So this is not New York State wide. Ban the Box is there's a New York City ordinance, there's a Suffolk County law, Westchester County, Buffalo City, Rochester City, and it's statewide for public employers. Okay, so there's not a lot of people online that represent public employers. So unless you're in one of these places, it doesn't apply to you. And then it's like, well, what if you have operations in another part of the state and your candidates from another part of the state? Well, then that gets into consideration too. So there's a lot to consider with Ban the Box. Ban the Box essentially prohibits the box, bans the box. So the box is the box on employment applications where somebody indicates that they have a past criminal history. Now, be careful, a lot of consent and authorization relating to background checks also has a similar type of box situation. So you want to look all over for the infamous box, which doesn't have to be a box, but it's a great name. So you want to be careful in those situations, and all of these laws and ordinances vary. So some require an actual job offer before you can ask that question or inquire into past criminal history. Others just require that perhaps you had an interview, be it even a telephone interview, then you can inquire about it. So you got to really know each ordinance's specifics around their situation. Now, some organizations have just decided unanimously to ban the box and not ask that question and not go there. And we've done that for a lot of our clients kind of in conjunction with the Clean Slate. More recently, in conjunction with Clean Slate than previously for Ban the Box, unless they were specifically in these locations that Ban the Box applies, okay? Then there's the New York City Fair Chance Act. Okay, this is just New York City, but it's the 5 boroughs of New York City. So if you have a candidate, regardless of where you're located, but your candidate is in New York City, you should be very conscientious of this and you should consult legal and your background screening company and make sure you're doing things in the right process. Essentially, the New York Fair Chance Act requires you to do everything else in a background check but the criminal history in the first part. So it's kind of, in the industry, they kind of call it a bifurcated background check. So you're first running education, employment, social media searches, things like that. Then if that all comes back good and clear and you review that, then you go to the next step and then you request the criminal history. So you can't take any action on the previous stuff after you request the criminal history. So you got to request that stuff, take any action you're going to take, like if you're not going to hire, different things like that. If you go ahead and order the criminal history piece, then that means everything else is okay and any action you take is based on criminal history after that. So it's to allow people with a criminal history to get even further in the hiring process by getting through part of the background check. Okay, so it's an interesting process. Like I said, a lot of organizations refer to it as bifurcated. So if you're going to talk to your current supplier, you might want to reference that word, but ask them how it's done in their system. And because so much is electronic these days, a lot of it is part of the system and part of the information flow through the system and when things happen and how things are set up. Now, there might be options there that you as the client have to set and are responsible for. So that's where you want to bring in your legal counsel, and you want to review that and you want to go through that. So really important there to be conscientious of the New York City Fair Chance Act. But the most important here for everybody online is the New York Clean Slate Act. If you have any individual questions or anything, please let me know. I've been almost weekly, I talk with somebody about it. So a lot of questions or unclear procedures out there, or not quite sure how to react when certain things come back. Regardless of who ran the background check, consider me a resource there.
Great.
There's
Thanks,
also, oh, sorry, Alex.
No.
There is a really good resource online, and you are going to get these slides, so you can click that link to the NYS Hiring Compliance Guide down there. That's going to give you even more detail than I was able to give you in this time, and really give you a good explanation there. So I do recommend that source. Sorry, Alex.
Oh, no, not a problem. Yeah, it is a good one. I had a hand in writing it, so I promise it is effective. Michelle, we talked about what New York employers should go to their providers with about criminal data questions and criminal data wise. Is there anything that they should be asking their providers about these compliance changes that you just kind of went over, Clean Slate, Ban the Box, Fair Chance Act? Is there anything they should be worried about outside of the criminal part, the more compliance section that they could ask their providers about?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I'm kind of maybe preaching to the choir a little bit here with background checks are not a commodity. There's a lot of differences, and there's a lot of differences in what people are looking for. So there's truly a fit out there with the different suppliers that are available. They're a risk management strategy, and I believe that, based upon the answers that our audience gave today, that's really their desire as well. So, being very conscientious of your budget and the background screening quote you get. A package quote is not the be all end all in our industry. There's a ton of third-party data access fees that get added on. So some of the best situations, and Tom, you could probably speak to this better than I can, but when somebody says, here's the situation, Sally Joe lived here and did this and did that, and what would this package cost, all fees included? So it requires you to get to those third-party fees. Did we run the New York checked search at $32.50 that came back with a clear, or did we run the New York State Office of Court Administration right away at $95? That's a huge difference in the price per package that you're not going to get when you look at just the face value of the package. So it's really all things considered, everything that goes into your background check. When's the last time you looked at a detailed invoice and really looked at all those fees in the total, divided it by the number of subjects, and really found out the average cost per subject? I talked to somebody a couple months ago. They had a $50 package. Their average price per person was $50. I said, have you looked at a detailed invoice lately? Can you get one? A couple months later, they call me up. Okay, our average price is $297. Not $50 package that they were sold on. So it's a lot to consider when it comes to the pricing. Anybody has any questions, wants me to go into more in depth, just reach out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Michelle. So I do have one last poll for everybody today. I promise it's our last one. We wanted to know specifically, because Clean Slate is top of mind. Michelle said it was just kind of signed last year and started rolling out recently. How confident are you in your organization's compliance with New York Clean Slate regulations? So if you're an out-of-state employer, obviously you don't have to answer, but anybody in New York would really like to hear, because if there is, a chance to give some more resources on Clean Slate and some more understanding, we'd love to be that person or that company to do it. So I'll leave it open for, again, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. We got a confident bunch, Michelle. Okay. We'll end it here. Easy enough. So yeah, we're very or somewhat confident, which is good. Nobody said what's Clean Slate, so that's excellent. If you said it, we just explained it. You can't say that. So that's awesome. We'll continue to keep updating everybody as the OCA, goes through and deals records like Michelle said, and as things change. But this is a good thing to know that we're at least on the right track for everybody here. So we are almost at time here. We do have saved a little bit of time for a Q&A session. If anybody has a question, please feel free to throw it in the chat for me. We did have one come from a person who wasn't actually able to make it today, but they wanted to know, how does CIChecked deal with applicants who they're a nationwide or a statewide company, excuse me. How do they deal with applicants ban the box wise in different jurisdictions, and how do we deal with that? So Michelle, that might be a better answer for you or a better question for you to go into, but they want to know, how do we deal with the different ban the box changes per jurisdiction in New York State?
Sure. So we can put into play any scenario that the employer wants. Okay. Probably one of the easiest and most universal is, if you do operate in a ban the box situation, is that you just apply ban the box across your whole organization and treat all your hiring similarly. And we even saw nationwide companies when ban the box started in 1999 in Hawaii. So it's been around a long time. So when organizations across the country, like say Walmart, when ban the box came into play, they just applied it across the country just to make it easier on everybody and not get too caught up in the situation. Also, if you slip, the liability shift, is a lot less when you apply it across the board versus not applying it when you should have. If you are in one of those jurisdictions where it covers, you want to look at specifically the law. And we actually have a resource where it lays out a few of the New York jurisdictions side by side and each of the different parameters, like how it applies and things like that. So you really want to get an idea of how it applies, when it applies, and how to use it. You still can ask the question, but a lot of times, if you really look at it, all of the different things is, after you've made the job offer, you've done all the other things that might come into play in other places, but making the job offer conditional on the background check, that is almost always an okay to run the background check. So you just put that into play. You don't ask the question till you make the conditional offer. So in that situation, a lot of people don't start their background checks till they've made the conditional job offer, which really became popular during COVID, when people, it was really hard to hire and people were trying to hire fast. So that really changed. Previously, people would run the background check and wait to make the offer, but they realized they couldn't do that. So then some of the ban the box stuff kind of went out the window because of the way that people were making the conditional job offer anyways.
Great, thank you. We had one come in through chat, and Tom, I think this might be a good one for you. Jonathan asked, do you offer a complete background screening package, criminal, employment, social, education, or everything else? Do we offer that?
Yeah, thanks, Alex, and appreciate the question. And I know we're coming up to time. It was awesome connecting with everyone here this afternoon. Yeah, so with respect to what we do from a solutioning perspective, yeah, absolutely. Holistically speaking, we offer background screening that touches on each of these elements and more. So full service shop here for nationwide and global criminal background screening, verification of employment, education, references, all of your primary databases. We include all of that. And from my perspective, it's really about what your program looks like now, what you're looking to improve. And that's generally where I like to start the conversation. But yeah, every element here we do and more. Thanks, Alex.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, we just feel we're, again, like I said, uniquely positioned to give this webinar on this topic. We've been here for 20 years. We've been doing it for a long time. It's our bread and butter. So we do offer the full suite, but just wanted to dive deep into New York State criminal screening options. So I'll give another minute here for any other questions. I don't want to keep us too late. I know we're pretty strict about time. But if nobody else has any other questions, we want to thank everybody for joining today. Again, we'll email all these slides, the video recording, the SHRM credit, all that coming up next week here. Just got to gather some things. And we will, this is our Q2 compliance webinar technically, so we'll continue with our next webinar sometime in September. So be on the lookout for announcements about that. Thank you for joining. We appreciate your time today, and be on the lookout for a little bit more.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it.